What's up, everyone? Kevin Allen here, aka The Geek from DFS Army, and today we're going over how to crush NASCAR DFS. So, look at this as kind of an intro to NASCAR DFS, essentially using DFS Army tools to smash. Now, before I get into all of this, I just want to say NASCAR is one of my favorite DFS sports, and as a kid from Brooklyn, I'm going to tell you straight up, it was not one of my favorite sports to watch growing up. I never watched NASCAR before DFS came along, but the sweat is awesome. The way these races play out, the way each track differs, it's something I've learned over the years. And I know that for a lot of you, getting into a new DFS sport, like, hey, I want to check this out, it can be intimidating because you really don't understand what it takes, what's the strategy, where do I even get started? So I want to talk about that. But first, I got to give you a little bit of credentials. I gotta, just gotta do it. So what we're gonna do, I want to just initially just talk about DFS Army NASCAR and why it's so awesome as DFS Army subscribers to get into this. There is no better group, no better projection set, and no better set of tools in the industry than what we provide over at DFS Army. It is not even close. It's one of the reasons our members are able to dominate this sport. And you might say, Kevin, that's bullshit. Of course, you're going to say that about sports that you guys cover, but the reality is, one of the nice things about NASCAR is it's so custom. The way that we cover NASCAR is so different from any place else that it really provides a serious edge. And I'm going to go over a little bit of those tools. But first, I just want to kind of scroll through some of just the big wins from last season in NASCAR DFS from DFS Army subs, and you'll see what I mean. So just on screen here, I'm going to scroll through a few of them here. But you've got this one here, Detroit Redskins, 10K, Draftkings, 700K, front row, tied for first. You do get a lot of ties in NASCAR for sure. Here's JJ last season, a 10K win in the 30K Piston. Let's see. Here's another big winner, Dark Sniper, 7K here on the DraftKings Bluegrass Drive, 50K to first contest. And they go on and on. Here's Jig is up winning an Xfinity Series race for 10K. And there's my boy JBC up top as well. Yeah, this is one of my favorite screenshots of them all, and this one really tells the tale. In this shot, you could see that Cuckoo, Edward, and Evans all tying for first place in the 300K to first Fanduel Sunday Intimate. This doesn't happen by accident. This happens because you have superior projection systems to place three members in first place in the same contest, all tied. That happens all the time. Here's another big one here for G Money, my boy, 12K. G Money set for life in his FanDuel account because of this one win. And that's not on a ton of money, $450 in entries. So he just maxed out some of the smaller contests, the $20 contests, and here put a few entries in this in the front row. And there you go, big money. It's wild. Yeah, here's a Truck Series 20K win. So one of the beautiful things here in DFS Army is it's not just the Cup Series that we're covering. We're covering trucks. We're covering Xfinity, whatever's going on, we're all over it. And it really, truly does make a difference. I'm going to show you a couple other really good ones that I love. Here's Daytona last year. Daytona's coming right up. M. Williams, 28K win. I actually won this tournament as well. A smaller version of it ended up in the NASCAR Fantasy Racing DraftKings Fantasy NASCAR Championships last season. Here's King of 9X, my boy. A big win in the 40K Octane for NASCAR as well. That's the duel. This was sort of a smaller contest. Nice little win there. Let me go down to the bottom here and see if there was one more. No, was that it? I don't want to waste too much time on this, but yeah, I'll go over a few more. Here's another really great win where you had Nicholas and Brutus, my boys, both tying for first place, 9K in the 150K. This is a $3 entry contest. Two members, 20 entry, two members tying for first. That's happening because you have superior projections. Now, you might say, fuck, I don't want to tie with people. Why are you sharing this info? Well, that's what we do in DFS Army. Our projections are here for our VIP subscribers. They are superior projections. And yeah, sometimes there are ties, but usually that happens when there are a lot of ties. One last win, Beavis, 70K, 100K Piston. I mean, come on. almost every race last season, you had a DFS Army avatar in first place, and there's a reason for it. So with all that being said, we've now established a little bit of credibility in terms of the tools. I'm going to tell you how to attack NASCAR DFS using these tools and how to be successful. So let's jump right in here, and I'm going to show you a couple of my favorite tools, and we're going to start with the research station that we have here for NASCAR. Now, one of the most important things with NASCAR is understanding the different track types and which type of drivers prosper in different track types. I had to learn all about this. It can be very intimidating at first, but our research station puts it all together for you in a way that's really just easy to understand. So, for example, the Clash happened, I believe this is for the duels. Yeah, so we have the duels. So the duels happened this week. Now, the duels occur on what are called super speedways. Super speedways are tracks that are so gigantic and so straight that NASCAR puts what are called restrictor plates on each car to limit how fast they can go. Now, what that means in terms that we can understand is in a normal race, each driver kind of has their car and they push it as hard as they can push it. And, better drivers, better cars go a little bit faster. Some crappy cars in the back, they can't keep up because they're not as good. They don't have as much money behind their teams. There's very big differences between the cars in an average race, especially for the scrubs in the back. In super speedways, that's leveled out a little bit. The cars just can't go that fast because they're super speedways, because there's so much straightaway. NASCAR limits how quick the car can drive. So what ends up happening is all of the cars pretty much move at about the same speed. So driver skill becomes a really, really critical component. And in these super speedways, something called drafting takes a massive step up. What does it all mean? Drafting. So drafting means cars connect to one another, essentially bumper to bumper. They drive really close to try to sort of get a little better aerodynamics. But what ends up happening in these style of races are, because all the cars are bunched up, crashes happen. And understanding which races cause chaos and which don't is one of the key factors of NASCAR. So how do we figure this stuff out? The first thing you'll see here is the research station. I'm not going to go through the entire research station because we're going to do a standalone tutorial for this. But I want to show you some of the basics of what I use when I quick glance over it. And we have so much going on the research that, again, a lot of these stats are proprietary. We're pulling them literally lap by lap in real time. They're not available anywhere else. You can't find these sort of statistics. We are literally going in and pulling lap by lap data of these racers to see from race to race how quickly they're going. There's a lot of edge to it, and it goes into our projection model. So one of the things I'll say, if you're already a DFS Army subscriber, is trust the projections. They're really, really good. As far as looking at track types, so the first thing you try to figure out is, all right, is this driver really good in this style of track? There are a couple of different track styles. I'm not an expert in it, but you have your super speedways, which are giant tracks, usually 2 miles with long straightaways. And those tend to be restrictor plate races where all the chaos happens. That's where the crashing happens. There are also 1.5 mile tracks, half mile tracks, for example, much, much smaller, lots more turning. 1.5 mile tracks, sort of the standard generic track style. Some of them have deeper banks, some of them don't, but tends to be drivers who are really good at 1.5 mile tracks, which are the standard for NASCAR. Then you have your road races. A totally different kind of driver does well in the road race. We just saw it the other day. As I'm recording this on February 12th, the starting race of the season was a Daytona road race, and certain drivers are really good at road tracks. Road tracks are tracks where you're turning left and right a lot. So essentially on a standard track, it's usually an oval or a triangle shape of some sort with slightly different curves for each one. Road tracks, you're turning left and right. You're rarely gunning it and getting full speed out of your car. It's kind of similar if you've ever gone to a go-kart track and driven one of those where there's a lot of turning left and right throughout. So different drivers are good at different race types. And it's really important to understand who those drivers are. The other component that's really important to understand is where the scoring happens. Where should I target drivers from? And I'm going to show you a little setting for that. But initially, when I'm looking at super speedway finishes, the first thing I try to look at is, all right, which drivers are good at super speedways? Well, we have our driver history section over here, which is a big, big part for me of what I'm looking at. And essentially, I want to find out up top, Who are the great super speedway drivers? Hello, Denny Hamlin. Looks like he's good at Daytona. Right? A lot of ones, a lot of green numbers, ones, fours, threes. That's a good sign. So I'm looking, all right, out of the stud group, who are good here? Who's good here? And this isn't a complete look because this is from the Clash. This doesn't include all the drivers, what I'm looking at right now, but you get the general idea. Then I try to go down on the salary list and say, all right, which scrubby drivers are kind of good at these type of tracks? And here you see, all right, Ryan Newman, wow, he's done pretty well at super speedways. Okay, that's good to know. How about Ty Dillon, third place, fourth place, cheap driver. He's been pretty good at these. Michael McDowell, you got to understand, when you see these reds, it usually means they crashed at one, but hey, he's done pretty well. So you start to get an idea by looking at these track histories of who's good at this style of race. And that's really, really critical. Driver rating is another important thing. We have driver rating broken down by track so that you can really take a look and quickly glance and understand, oh, wow, okay, Logano, Hamlin, looks like Ricky Stenhouse, looks like Alex Bowman, all pretty good at this type of track, all kind of green, all solid numbers. Go down the list. Yep, there he is, Michael McDowell again, Ty Dillon again, Daniel Suarez. So, and who's bad, right? You don't want these guys with these low rates. So, with these low ratings. So, that's a quick way to look at the research station and just kind of briefly glance, and without having to be intimidated by sort of all of these numbers, hey, this is a really quick glance to look at it. Again, we can get more in depth on the research station. I'm not really going to do it right now. But one other thing I really like to look at is total laps finished. Why? Because we want to find drivers that won't crash. So, drivers that have a high propensity to crash are more dangerous. So you look at a guy like, let's see here, like Cole Custer, 99%. It looks like this guy's just really good at staying safe in super speedways. 99% finish rate. So that could potentially be a cash play. That's actually Ryan Newman. So that could potentially be a cash play. Ryan Preece, another guy. Hey, he looks like he finishes most of his races. That's really good. Some other guys that crash more often, we could be a little bit more concerned about them. Suarez, the Reds, these guys who are crashing a little bit more. Now, one really, really great, this is probably my favorite tab of them all on the research station. I think it's the most important. Average scoring by starting position. So one of the biggest hurdles in NASCAR DFS, the first thing I need to try to understand, just like with every sport, it's really easy to pick a bunch of studs, right? We know who the studs are. We know who's really good. They're priced up. Draftkings, Fanduel, they're telling you who the studs are. They price them up, right? Even if you know nothing, you could be like, oh, this guy's 10K. Great. He's a stud. How do I fit studs in my lineup? I need to figure out, can I go stars and scrubs in a race? Should I go mid-value? How do I need to approach it? Certain track types, the scrubs, the cheap drivers, the ones with the mediocre equipment, have no chance. And we need to uncheck them, right? And this is, again, just using the research station, but here's a tool that kind of gives you an idea of average scoring based on starting position. So look how telling this is right here. So this is averages by 5 starting positions. You could do individual starting position, but Taco did a really good job figuring out that it's better off to do it in bunches of 5 to 10. So right here, what this is saying is at Daytona, in this style of track, drivers starting 30th, 36th to 40th tend to score 37.5 fantasy points. And anybody 26th to 40th, they all seem to be in the same bucket of 35 to 36 points. This is telling because it's showing that drivers starting up top, 1st to 5th, tend to only score 12 fantasy points. What the fuck, right? Why is this happening? What is going on here? This is showing you these type of tracks are not ideal. You want to avoid drivers starting up front because specifically in these type of tracks, dominator points, and I got to talk about dominator points, but dominator points aren't heavily available. So drivers starting in the front don't tend to score as much as drivers starting in the back who get positional points. Now, I just talked about fantasy scoring, and it reminds me that one thing we need to get into is how our drivers scored. How do you score points? This is a key part and a critical part of your strategy. and it's slightly different between FanDuel and DraftKings. So I'm going to go over to FanDuel, DraftKings first, and I'm going to show you their scoring system and how this works and how we need to look at it. All right, so on DraftKings, place differential is worth plus or minus 1 point. Now, in the previous section, I just talked about how in super speedways, those drivers starting really between 26th and 40th, so the bottom of the group, tend to score the most average fantasy points. The reason is because place differential, right? For every spot that you move up from your starting point, you get 1 plus point for place differential. So a driver starting 40th that finishes 25th, let's do the math, right? 25th will get them 17 fantasy points. Moving up from 40th to 25th is another 15 fantasy points. So you're already at 32. Now, that's relevant because we just talked about how those drivers starting in the back tend to score around 35, 36 points. There's a reason for that. But just moving up to 25th place from 40th gets you to 32 fantasy points in the DraftKings scoring system. Now, that doesn't include any potential fast laps that you get, which add 0.45 points for each fast lap. Those are hard to predict most of the time, but not always. Now, what's the other component here? Laps led. So one of the things we talk about a lot in DFS NASCAR are quote-unquote dominators. What is a dominator? A dominator is a driver that is likely or has the potential to get to first place and dominate the race, meaning hang out in first place and rack up laps led points. Finding the dominator in each race is one of the most critical things, unless the race doesn't favor dominators, which we will discover as we break down each track type. Again, the super speedways are one track type where dominators don't matter as much. They're less critical. And essentially, the larger the track, the less important the dominator is. On the smallest tracks, like the half mile, the dominators are everything, because you can, a half mile track to do 500 miles or 300 miles, you're talking 600 laps. That means 600 quarter point dominator points to go around. 600, that's over 100 dominator points for that. And again, 600 fast laps to go around, which can total 300 points. So there's a ton of essentially what are called dominator points available, and different track types favor different things. Some track types, if you're in the lead, you're going to be racking up all the fast laps and all the dominator points combined, where those are super dominator tracks where you could just, one driver could rack up a ton of points. There's no catching. Other races, for example, like the super speedway that we have coming up this weekend for Daytona, fast laps just kind of happen randomly and you can't really predict where they'll be. So we just kind of ignore that possibility. They definitely don't happen to leaders of the first place. The person on the pole will not rack up fast laps in Daytona, which is great because, again, that moots dominator points in favor of, again, those drivers starting in the back that are getting place differential points. Now, all of this sounds very intimidating, but it's really not. Now, I still want to go through, because we cover all of this in our notes and in our breakdowns of every race. A couple other details to take a look at. Here's the Fanduel system. Fanduel works a little bit differently as the Super Draft. Scoring-wise, they don't give any fast lap points. So Dominator mooted a little bit right off the bat. Fanduel actually adds a component for laps completed, 0.1, and they only give 0.1 points for laps led. So what does that mean? Fanduel's scoring is much less about dominator points and much more about finishing position. Most of your points on Fanduel are just coming from where you finish. The other thing, place differential, they also kind of muff that down a little bit and only give you half a point, whereas DraftKings is giving you a full point. So Fanduel system is a little bit different. So it's really, really important for us. And our projection model, for example, is really different for Fanduel than DraftKings. And we'll go back to our example here on the research station. This was the DraftKings average by start. And you saw on this race that it tends to favor 36 through 40, really 26 through 40th in this race track style. If you look at FanDuel, there is no such advantage for picking drivers starting last because place differential is much less important than finishing position. So if you look at FanDuel for the exact same race, drivers 1 through 5 or 6 through 10 are scoring just as many points. There's no advantage. So on FanDuel, we're much more looking for drivers who are good and we could fit into a lineup that will finish in the top 5 or 10. Notice the difference. Totally different strategy between FanDuel and DraftKings. And SuperDraft is sort of a hybrid. They kind of go a little bit more similar to the FanDuel scoring system, but SuperDraft has its own special twists that we can get into. I'm not going to get into too much of that right here, but that are covered in our projection models that really, really favor projections accuracy. So I've had incredible success just really following our projection models on SuperDraft. It's by far been my most successful sport in the multiplier format. So we love all of this stuff. Now, a couple other tools we have at our disposal here for DFS Army subscribers. Number one are our coaches' notes. Now, what the coaches do, we have some of the best NASCAR DFS players in the world, and also real fans of the sport that know the drivers, know the details. We get things like, we get radio reports coming in from drivers where we find out what the drivers are telling their spotters in practice. We get a lot of inside stuff that we share with our members because our staff is really, really plugged in to the NASCAR scene in general. On top of that, for every race, you get a cheat sheet with core plays, cash, GPP, notes. One of the things Taco does on his sheet is he'll give recommended mass multi-entry exposures. So here we go on the, what was this for? The Clash at Daytona. Looks like the first one of the Clash races, whatever this was. This was the Clash, which was the road race at Daytona. You'll see loaded up on Chase Elliott, loaded up on Elliott, who I believe won it, loaded up on Truex and Denny Hamlin, like this trio of studs. We loaded up on them. And the notes told you, 5-star core play, 4.5-star dominator confidence, all of that. So you have breakdowns of every driver, who are the great plays, and even recommended exposures ranges. We don't give out specific exposures, of course. We don't want everybody to do the same thing, and I don't recommend everybody doing the same thing, but this type of information is really, really helpful for me. Again, I never watched NASCAR in my life before I started playing it for DFS, and I've got win after win. It's one of my favorite sports to play. The sweat is like no other in NASCAR. And of course, not just Taco, but we have dueling opinions here. We'll have notes from Larkin, notes from Brady Miller, all really sharp NASCAR minds, some of the best players in the game, and also guys who are just really, really knowledgeable about the sport itself. So taking a combination of DFS knowledge and knowledge of the sport and mixing it all together for a wonderful sort of mix of everything that you need. The final and piece de resistance is, of course, the Domination Station Optimizer, which brings it all together for you. One of the great things about the Dom Station is, of course, we bring all the projections together. You could it's really easy to just make a lineup. The reality is that you can sort by total fantasy points and get an idea of who the best drivers are in any given race. You can set your preferences. So let's say one of the coaches' notes says Truex is a core play or Blaney is a core play. You could smash a like on them, give them a 5% projection boost, make sure they show up in lineups, run some lineups, and right off the bat, you're already producing what is a pretty good, what are pretty good optimals right off the bat, really playable in cash games and whatnot. But one of my favorite things is on top of just the projection model, you have ownership projections. So we can play our game theory game because we project ownership for every single race, including the truck, including this Xfinity series. And this is super critical because one of the things you have to understand is the high owned plays are the best plays. At the same time, these are your cash plays. Like the high owned plays, they're your best plays. They're the cash plays. Chalk, like anything else, chalk is chalk for a reason. They're great plays. You want to make a cash lineup, boom. You just try to fit the most ownership you can into a lineup that's pretty much going to be your best shot at a cash lineup for any of these. And in tournaments, we can leverage ownership to our advantage. One of the big things about NASCAR is chaos, crashes. And chalk drivers tend to crash just like in your mind, just happens a lot. So there are approaches you could do to mass multi-entry in tournaments where we quickly understand, all right, Keselowski's going to be the highest owned guy. What do you want to do? You want to go over? You want to just load up on Keselowski? Or do you want to fade him completely and say, you know what? Here's my approach today. If Keselowski wins, I don't. But if he loses, 60% of the field are dead, and I'm in great shape. So there's two ways to approach NASCAR. I tend to think that fading the extreme chalk is the best way, even though it's painful on those times when the chalk hits. It's amazing when it doesn't. And you will note in NASCAR, the chalk crashes a lot. It's just one of those things that happen, right? Maybe it's in my head, but it always feels like the chalkiest driver is crashing. So even if it's not that often, it's often enough that you probably make more money in tournaments fading chalk than you do going over the field in chalk. That's just how DFS works across all sports, by the way. It's just difficult to execute it because it's so painful in between the wins. But that is pretty much the best way to do it, game theory, and staying off the chalk and, hoping that the field gets whittled when the chalk explodes. So one of the great things is the domination station. We show the highest projected owned plays. I love to find situations where our projection model is putting us on a driver that isn't going to be high owned. Love those plays. I don't fade those at all. Yesterday it happened in the race with Ty Dillon, for example. He was everywhere in my lineup. So he owned like 12, 13% owned. He had a really good finish in the Clash race, and that worked out really well. Now, one other item we have are our dominator rules. Now, I talked about dominators earlier. One of the things our coaches point out, and you can see on the research station, is trying to understand, all right, how many dominators do I want in any given race? So again, each track type is unique. In Daytona Super Speedway, we want 0 to 1 dominator, no more than 1, maybe 0, probably 0. Because again, I pointed out before that in Daytona, dominator points really don't rack up the same way that place differential points do. And so dominator is just not that great. It's fine to have one, but you don't want to force it. And dominators are usually coming from the first 10 drivers. So it can be ideally something we avoid. In other races like the half-mile track, you want 2 or 3 potential dominators in your lineup because there are going to be so many dominator points to go around. Now, how do we control that? You can control it. Force at least. So we have this dominator rule where you just say stack at least, exactly, or at most 1 dominator in each lineup. Now, who's a dominator? We have them marked off for you. Who are the potential dominators in a race? They are all marked yes. Now, what you can do as a user is you say, well, I think Truex is a dominator. You can change him. Put him on that list. And then stack at least 1, at least 2, exactly 1, at most 1. It's up to you. Like for Daytona, I'd stack at most 1. And I might include every driver starting from 1st to 15th place in that group to make sure that no lineup has more than 1 top 15 driver. You can go at least 1, force at least 1, exactly 1, which will force 1 but not allow a second one. So the flexibility on the domination station is really exactly designed for NASCAR DFS. And that's one of the great things we do here in DFS Army. Every sport on the Dom station is really designed specifically for that sport. And, the proof is in the pudding. You've seen it here. Multiple wins, multiple members tying each other for first place, various contests, different sites across NASCAR. That doesn't happen by accident. If you just played NASCAR the whole season with DFS Army and pretty much just ran, without too much adjustment, the top 20 lineups in every contest, you're probably going to win one this season. Like, it's hard to imagine that you wouldn't, considering what we've done over the year. You probably win more than one this season without doing a whole lot. Now, I certainly like to adjust and tweak a lot as much as I can. I like to consider going fading chalk or going all in on certain plays, and hopefully that increases the win odds for most. But the tools are here anyway that have shown they're good enough to take down tournaments without too much adjustment. And again, multiple subscribers tying for first place multiple times over the course of a season. That doesn't happen by accident. All right, I'm going to wrap it up there, guys. That's a brief overview of how to crush NASCAR DFS using DFS Army tools here in the 2021 NASCAR season. Go to NASCAR, DFSArmy.com. We have NASCAR-specific memberships if that's all you do. Reduced price. I think it's $10 a week. This would have been a great week. And your NASCAR membership, like this weekend, it's got 3 races. You got a trucks race tonight. You've got a Xfinity tomorrow. You've got a Cup race on Sunday. All great stuff. All super fun. Every single weekend. Notes for everything. Research station for each race, including trucks, including Xfinity. No one else has what we have going on for NASCAR. It's not even close. If you're serious about NASCAR DFS, you are a DFS Army subscriber. You already are a DFS Army subscriber. If you're thinking about getting serious, check us out. Get in our group. Start winning at NASCAR. Good luck this weekend, everybody. And again, we will be back with regular VIP-only breakdowns, videos. So that's part of it, too. I didn't get into it, but VIP-only videos and breakdowns for most of these races. The ones where we can have enough time in advance to do a breakdown video. Like that won't be for trucks series events where qualifying is 2 hours before the race, but you'll see that for some Xfinity and definitely for some Cup Series races, as long as we get the qualifying times enough in advance to really break it down. So good luck this season, everybody, and I hope to see you at the top of these tournaments.